Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the PYRESWAP show. Today is Thankful Thursday, and it's really Theory Thursday, but I do think I wanted to implement being as thankful as possible and expressing gratitude for everybody who's making this possible. So, you know, if you're watching this broadcast, whether it's live or recorded, whatever, just know that I am grateful for you. I am thankful for, I guess, the countless people that made this possible, including the people that were antagonists, including the people that have only set up roadblocks. A lot of the things that, you know, were originally perceived to be roadblocks and obstacles turned out to be for our benefit. And, you know, for those of you who don't know, we're recruiting for the Senorita Circus right now. We have several people that we are inducting into our membership, and I know that maybe this is hard for you guys to understand if you're like just an investor, but had we been recruiting during a green candle streak, we would be recruiting weaker people. Does that make sense? And I know for a fact that there's a significant upside from doing it right now, because you definitely get to separate the men from the proverbial boys, if that makes sense. And on top of that, I wrote all this as a joke, but yeah, shot put, forehead kisses, more on that later. Does that make sense? This is these are the quote unquote buzz phrases of 5. But today there is some macro news in that the NAR is going to be releasing a report in about 30 minutes. For those of you who don't know, the National Association of Realtors is a trade union in the United States that basically controls the housing market de facto. They control something called the MLS, which is the super system that has all the housing market data on it. All residential real estate generally goes to the MLS. There are a few competitors to the MLS, but the MLS is like significantly over 90% of the market. And the NAR was actually sued, I want to say in 2023, over non-competitive business practices, because due to their monopoly, they were effectively artificially inflating the amount of commission on a residential real estate purchase. So for those of you who don't know, in the United States, we had this like going rate of 6% for commission, and it was like 3% buyer, 3% seller, as it were. But in the end, the United States has one of the highest real estate commissions worldwide. In fact, I think only Japan had us beat with 7%. And this 6% market rate had been in place since the 80s and the 90s. I think several decades, there was this 6% market rate, this rate of commission. And for those of you who don't understand, the home buying journey in the 80s or 90s literally required a lot more work for the real estate agent. There wasn't the internet back then. Does that make sense? Like, you were using binders to find listings, and you were effectively kind of working together with like a library of listings between all other brokerages and stuff like that. There was a whole bunch of logistics about getting all the information to the right place. Now in the age of the internet, I want to say 97% of home buying journeys start on the internet. Does that make sense? Like, you just Google houses for sale, and then there's just immediately a bunch of search engine optimization flooding the screen. Yeah, so the price of the work, yeah, the $600,000 in Zillow, correct. The price of the work, does that make sense? The amount of workload reduced significantly for real estate agents, but the commission stayed high, if that makes sense. This didn't really necessarily like benefit real estate agents even. Like, there's still always like this incredibly competitive and bloodthirsty market that definitely experiences its highs and its lows. But yeah, that's anyways, the NAR today is releasing a report in about 25 minutes about home buying sales nationwide for the last year, or I think for July. But these numbers are also a huge macro indicator into the health of the economy, because for those of you who don't know, real estate and the the derivatives that come from real estate mortgages were a huge player in the recession of 2007. If you guys weren't aware of that, the financial crisis of 2007 was primarily driven through mortgage-backed collateralized debt options, effectively. Okay, so additionally, the Jackson Hole Symposium is now live. Let's see. If we Google, let's find out. If I search up Jackson Hole Symposium right now, okay. Well, hilariously, they have something for they have something for last year, but the Jackson Hole Symposium, I believe it starts today. So maybe there's no really news. There's no news to break so far on the Jackson Hole Symposium. But yeah, these are 3 things. This one's from 3 days ago. Yeah. So the Jackson Hole Symposium. Okay, 1 hour ago. Fantastic. Investing.com. Yeah. Okay. So the economic is attended by central bankers, finance ministers, academics, and financial market participants from around the world. Honestly, next year we should make it a plan to go. Yeah, we should make that. We should make that traveling content. Yeah, the Seniorid Circus should attend the Jackson Hole Symposium. And yeah, anyway, it starts today. And obviously, Jackson Hole, Wyoming is to the west of us. So I'm assuming that they haven't even had opening remarks yet, which they might in like, I don't know what their schedule is, to be honest. But yeah, so the remarks at this symposium is like an annual event for the Federal Reserve. And it's, yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. I think that like a lot of people, you know, to touch on the Jackson Hole Symposium, because it's sort of similar in a sense to other events like the World Economic Forum. Have you guys ever heard of the World Economic Forum? Yeah. Okay. So people, the World Economic Forum, yeah, okay. Oh yeah, that's Klaus Schwab is the word. Okay, Maddie, I want you to say like the word, by the way, the word that we're seeing used in Discord is evil for the World Economic Forum. I want you to understand that is actually just a meme, okay? And I want to explain why there is this internet perception of the World Economic Forum being evil, okay? The World Economic Forum is a conference. Does that make sense? So it's a fucking conference. And like, it actually doesn't even cost more, like that much more than some of the crazier priced crypto conferences. So like, I want to say that the WEF, I think it's like $28,000 for a ticket. Does that make sense? And you might be saying, $28,000 for a ticket? This is a fucking Taylor Swift concert? Holy shit, that's fucking pricey. But compared to other conferences out there, like crypto conferences, they're also charging 4-figure and 5-figure prices. I believe the Satoshi Roundtable charges like 20 grand a ticket. Did you guys know that? That there is a crypto conference that's like very, very, I think they limit it to like 500 people, something like that. Yeah. Let me see. Can I Google Satoshi Roundtable ticket price? Satoshi Roundtable ticket. Okay, literally, okay. Like, you know what? You don't even have good results for this, but okay, no big deal. Yeah, $20,000 to take pics with Satoshi. Yeah, that's what it is. But the fact of the matter is, there's nothing other than this price tag gating somebody from attending. Does that make sense? So when they say like, oh, this is where all the world's elites meet, it's like, well, they charge 28 grand for a ticket. So like, that isn't like, hey, you need to be somebody to get in here. They will let anybody through the door for $20,000 a ticket. Now, the fucking problem, or should I say the perspective of like why it seems like there's a bunch of crazy ideas that get floated at the World Economic Forum, because let's put it this way. Let's say they have like 75 speakers on a single stage, okay? Okay? Like 74 of them? Yeah. Like 74 are going to be like, you know, we need ESG subsidies or some shit like this, right? We need ESG subsidies because of this cool picture. Yeah. Because of solar punk utopianism. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Do you guys know what I mean when I say solar punk utopia? Okay, here, I'm gonna Google that. Yeah. Let's see what image search shows up for this. Solar punk utopia. Literally there, yeah, like some stuff like this. Honestly, Google would do better here than fucking Brave. That was not Google. There we go. Does that make sense? This image right here. Okay. Literally, they throw some image like this on the screen. Does that make sense? And they're like, hey, we need ESG subsidies. And they fucking just show this picture, okay? So 74 of these speakers will be like, hey, solar. And they're just like there. They're there because the people who attend this stuff, like they effectively just grift subsidies in order to make these fucking like bleeding edge fucking social proof tech things happen. Does that make sense? Like the type of people that would attend a World Economic Forum, like they're also the type of people that kind of subscribe to an ideology that would just lap this shit up. Does that make sense? Then, by the way, so you have 74 people and it's like, it's boring as shit. Then 75, then person 75, right? 1 through 74 is like this. 75. We need to eat bugs, right? And live in pods, right? And then the internet just focuses on this like 75th person, which has like this arguably like way out of left field fucking idea. Does that make sense? Yeah. JB, no, you wish it was that. Like more so, the internet gets this. We need to eat bugs and live in pods. Does that make sense? You'll own nothing and be happy, right? They said that before. And all it is like, they're just saying this to probably like a bunch of trust fund kids. Does that make sense? That trying to like pretend to be that they're philanthropists. And they just think about like this as all of their misery as trust fund kids comes from the fact that their parents were rich, and then therefore that like the world put this onus on them that they need to be a philanthropist. Does that make sense? Like so like this is why the internet is gonna focus on the most extreme shit that happens there. But like most of like 1 through 74, they had Javier Milei on there, and like Javier Milei was definitely not saying you need to eat bugs and live in pods. Does that make sense? So like the internet's perspective of the WEF is just lensed and skewed by focusing on this extremely weird person at the WEF, because arguably I would imagine that this is in the WEF's content marketing scheme. Does that make sense? Like, you know, Burning Man is also happening right now, but like I guess they're not driving attendance. Most of Burning Man is just like a bunch of like art that's large scale. Does that make sense? They build these gigantic sculptures out of like scrap metal. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? They build these 30-foot tall, these 10-meter tall sculptures out of scrap metal, right? But then but like at the Burning Man, they also focus that like, hey, they hired 10 prostitutes to run an orgy tent at Burning Man. But there's literally like 100,000 people at Burning Man. So it's just like they focus on like the weirdest part of Burning Man. They're like, hey, that's what Burning Man's all about. Because when you're lensing stuff through the internet, you're going to get that perspective. Does that make sense to you guys? So like the World Economic Forum, like again, you could just go into the nearest homeless shelter and you would have way more extreme opinions about society and what the future should look like. Yeah, exactly. So like again, the World Economic Forum, it is just a conference. You can get in there yourself with 28 grand. Maybe we'll do that for fucking Senor Red Circus content in the future too. Maybe we'll go to Jackson Hole and we'll go to the World Economic Forum. But yeah, you know what? The World Economic Forum also has crypto satellite events. Like they literally just throw a crypto conference like next to the World Economic Forum because it's just a bunch of people that are in town in Switzerland to attend this global conference on economics. And I don't know if you guys can tell just from the relatively small audience we have for this show, most people do not intuitively grasp economics. So if you throw a speaker up there and they're like, hey, we need to eat bugs and live in pods, like it's not it's not that mind-blowing that they come at this fucking opinion because they're just narrowing, they themselves are narrowed down on this one, like, hey, did you guys know that if you eat bugs, you can get protein out of it or something? And they think that, like, okay, well, what we need to do is we need to feed that to people. Or you could feed that to the chickens and the fucking things that people eat, right? Because chickens already eat bugs. Does that make sense? So when you guys eat chicken, which, by the way, chicken is the most consumed animal in the world. I want to say like 7 trillion chicken get consumed a year. Did you guys know that? 7 trillion chicken. Yeah. So like, Jaber, yeah, your chickens eat bugs all day long. They are getting those nutrient-rich crickets and beetles all day long. Does that make sense? And they turn those bugs into chicken meat, which you and I have no problem eating. Does that make sense? So like, again, it's basic stuff. Yeah, eggs too. Yeah. They produce feathers as well, right? Yeah, people eat chicken liver as well. And the fact of the matter is like that stuff does get used. Like it's already like there are bugs getting consumed by the things that humans consume. But like it's somebody else saying, the problem is we need to cut out the middleman and just get humans to eat bugs. It's like we don't need to, we can just eat chickens because chickens eat bugs. Yeah. Again, just because somebody's on a stage at the World Economic Forum doesn't mean that they're going to be able to like sway global policy. Does that make sense? Like, honestly, I don't even think the presidents of most countries attend the World Economic Forum. I mean, I guess Javier Milei did, but like, yeah, like it's just like, you know, the way that people perceive the way the world works. It's like these are a bunch of rich people networking and stuff at a fucking World Economic Forum, but that doesn't mean that they hear this speech and they're immediately like throwing money behind it. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a crypto conference before, but like they will let anybody speak if they pay a fee. Does that make sense? So all it takes is somebody with enough money behind a cricket farm to pay the speaker fee to get their speaker on stage to shill the idea of marketing crickets. Does that make sense? Because all they're looking for is they're looking for a buyer for their weird cricket burger. Do you guys get it? Yeah, it's literally just an advertisement. But like the World Economic Forum is not an NGO. It's literally a conference. It's not the UN. Yeah. By the way, the UN is also not that powerful. Do you guys know what the UN's annual budget is? This is a great thing to Google as well. Good morning. Good morning, Naldo. What's going on, Naldo? Okay. On December 24th, here, I'll read it out for the whole class, okay? On December 24th of 2023, less than a year ago, the General Assembly has approved a $3.59 billion budget for the United Nations for 2024, including the establishment of a special account to finance the organization's peace-building fund. Wow. Talk about a fucking grift. Yeah, holy shit. Can you guys imagine having money for a peace-building fund? Yeah, I mean, okay. Literally see, and they might have done a bit more for world peace. But okay, see, it's not even that. Okay, so literally the UN 3.6 billion. Sorry, this is a D. Or we'll just make that a B like this. No, let's not do that. Okay, 3.6 billion a year. Okay, what do you guys think the United States Department of Defense has for an annual budget? Mr. Producer, I'll get it. Okay, 820 billion per year. 820 billion per year against the United Nations 3.6 billion a year. Okay? Like, I know that maybe for everybody watching this, both of these seem like large numbers, but I want you guys to at least compare the difference in size. What I'm getting at is the United States military is 200 times more powerful than the United Nations. The United Nations, now what they have, I mean, in my opinion, the United Nations has always been a joke. it's more like a hotel lobby. Does that make sense? I think the United Nations is like a hotel lobby for like, you know, diplomats. Does that make sense? Like they just, it's the same concept. The United Nations, you guys understand, they let teenagers give speeches there, right? Greta Thunberg, do you guys remember that? It's like they just, like somebody like paid to have their kid like give a speech because the kid was passionate. Do you know who else becomes UN ambassadors? Yeah, Christina Aguilera was a UN ambassador. Did you guys know that? I think they let, this other actress who I can't think of. What was the actress that played Hermione in the Harry Potter movies? Emma Watson, yeah. Emma Watson, also a UN ambassador. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, so, like, it's literally just again, the clowns performing on a stage, that one right there. It's just theatrics. Now, I want you guys to understand, the UN, if you look at the UN building, they would have over 100 national flags right in the parking lot. Do you guys agree that there would be 100 national flags on the building of the Hague or the one in the one in New York City? Right? Let's pull that up. United Nations building. And yeah, look at that. Look at this image. Look at all these flags, you guys. Look at them. Wow. Well, look at all those flags. That's just a fraction of the flags. I mean, Maddie, I could also, yeah, like that's not even that crazy. Yeah, like the Rockefellers donate or sell the building. Yeah, that's fine. The Rockefellers own a bunch of buildings in the past. Yeah. Seriously, that's exactly the point. Because you see the flags of Japan, and I believe that's Australia, and I think I see India, and I think I see Germany maybe. I have no idea. I can't really see from here. Indonesia. I see Kenya. Again, I'm not going to even try to list this off here. But the fact of the matter is, if you saw all those national flags in one building, it makes you think that like this building has the power of all those nations united. Does that make sense? And clearly it doesn't. Zero Kex, that's literally what you're looking at. You're looking at a pre-owned car with a bunch of bumper stickers. Yeah, that's the way I would describe it. Oh, yeah, or like, oh, they must be very powerful. Again, this is just an example of like people accept superficial indications. So like again, yeah, Subaru. Anyways, point being is that like learn to analyze things beyond the superficial is what I'm getting at here. And we can get into that in Theoretical Thursday here too. But yeah, the UN, the budget compared to the DoD is like 1/200th. It has hundreds of countries, not just the United States. Granted, the USA military budget is the highest in the world, of course. But like, just for example, there are dozens of countries that have budgets higher than the UN's budget. Does that make sense? Like, I want to say Ukraine has a higher budget than this. I wouldn't be surprised if Afghanistan has a higher military budget than this. You know, Afghanistan, which is now run by the group formerly known as the other group. Yeah, like, so, like, I'm just saying that there's probably like 50 countries that have a military budget higher than the UN. Anyways, maybe not 50. I have no idea there, but I would expect that it's not just the U.S. I know that there are several countries that are in the billions. Well, Jaybreak, yeah, I mean they're getting it from somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if the UN gave them some too. Okay. So, anyways, yeah, we can close this picture of the UN, the Jackson Hole Symposium, etc., etc. So again, yeah, the World Economic Forum, it's a conference. Any single one of you guys could go if you're willing to pay the ticket price of 28 grand. You would meet, I guess, tons of people that have the ability to go as well. Does that make sense? If you care to be a networker, you could listen to speakers. But like the ones that are going to end up being social media content are the ones that are going to be the most clickbaity. Does that make sense? Like, you know, clickbait, the idea of clickbait, this is a real thing that affects like, this is a real thing that it affects people's worldview right now. And it's also why like politics inside democracies becomes incredibly polarized in the age of social media. Do you guys get what I'm saying? People want confirmation bias more than they want comprehension. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, people don't want to learn something new. They want to be told what they already think. They want to be told what they already believe. Okay? So, like, that's just, it's less mental labor. It doesn't cause the anguish of learning you're wrong, which is also laborious. Yeah. Anyways, are there likely people that are evil at the UN, at the WEF, in the US DOD? Yeah, for sure, for sure. People that have the weirdest, they believe that they're saving the world, for sure. But like, to a different perspective, it looks like they're like, oh my God, this person wants me to be, they want to abolish Lockean property rights. They want me to live in a pod and eat cricket burgers. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, but that, you know, again, Zero Kex, you're not wrong. Yeah. Again, yeah, okay, a word I use for this is auto-heuristic. I don't know if this is the right word, but this is my vocabulary, this is my terminology. And auto-heuristic is a word I use to describe human nature in the sense that people are always looking for the easiest way to come to a conclusion, or people are always looking for the easiest way to make a decision. Does that make sense? So, like, they don't want to analyze. Like thinking is laborious to most people. So like whatever they can do to just get past thinking, whether it's they start to trust a brand, they start to form a prejudice or a bias, they start to form a belief about a certain group of people, about a certain politician, about a certain religious group, about a certain food, about a certain sports team, about a certain coworker, about a certain, like a certain advertisement. They want to arrive at the easiest thing to make a decision. If we talk about how PYRESWAP has to compare against meme coins, would you guys understand that meme coins provide for ease of they provide for auto-heuristic ease, whereas PYRESWAP relatively would be auto-heuristically difficult. Making sense, everybody? When you learn about a meme coin, it's like 4 things. It's like liquidity is burned, total supply, the chain it's on, the picture and the name. Does that make sense? Maybe you care about like what the devs are doing or who it's launched by, but like all of that stuff ends up being a rumor anyway. Does that make sense? So like again, anyways, first of all, can you guys tell that our Twitter is already ramping things up? Have you guys seen that our Twitter is beginning to enter the real arena of being a true Web3 Twitter account? Did you guys notice that? As recently as 24 hours ago. Yeah, have you guys noticed? So, first of all, I want to, again, voice my appreciation for everybody. Seabiscuit says he's seen it. I want to voice, my appreciation for everybody in Discord, but our Discord community tends to be introverted, and we now need to balance the scale and get more extroverts. So, our Twitter game is going to ramp up. Then we're going to get our, Peg is not incorrect there. Yeah, Peg is not really incorrect there. You have to learn about it first. Yeah, it's just the labor of learning. The problem with this though, and this is what I don't think people understand in the game theory, is that like the more and more people that play meme coins, they begin to get a familiarity for it. Does that make sense? But at the same time, as you're getting a familiarity for it, that ends up with them having a bearishness for it. Does that make sense? Like, people are beginning to see more and more that meme coins fail more than they succeed, and therefore that's causing meme coins to fail more than they succeed. Does that make sense? So like meme coins having like a higher failure rate, that becomes like self-fulfilling due to this being like late in the meme coin season. Pepe is over a year old now. Pepe is 16 months old or something like this. Does that make sense? So like, you know, out of thousands of meme coins that have been launched, maybe 5 of them have broken the top 200 market caps, maybe 10, you know, intermittently before departing, right? what it does kind of imply is that instrument performance matters more than technology, which I don't disagree with. Meme coins, which mean nothing, will break into the top 50 market caps, and they will be surpassing like actual technology products. Do you know what I mean? Like the graph, right? Like GRT will get surpassed by meme coins. Pocket will get surpassed by meme coins. Doge actually has a chain behind it too. Yep. Oh yeah, and everybody come show love to the PYRESWAP Twitter again. Yeah, like even the engagement there, it helps us. Our Twitter account was low activity for like a year. Does that make sense? So in order for us to shake the dust off of it, a lot of engagement does help us continue to get the eyeballs of people that are already following us. Does that make sense to you guys? So if you guys are on Twitter, the great news now is our Twitter is going to be having more content. So when you see our content, we would appreciate your engagement with it. Whether it's a reply, whether it's a like or a retweet, all good stuff. Or if you save the tweets too. I think you can just save them. That helps too. But yeah, more on that later. For those of you who don't know, we have stickers. Okay. We have stickers getting distributed, and I'll tell you all these cities. Hang on. Okay. We have them getting distributed in Istanbul, Ankara, Bursa, Trabzon, Kayseri, Niğde, Van, Hakkari, and Mersin. So I think that's like 10 different cities in Turkey that we're going to have PYRESWAP stickers distributed in. And they're all going to be photographed. So, what I'm getting at here is all these stickers that we're putting out all across the globe, as it were. By the way, the country that we are most popular in per capita is Turkey, by the way. So again, we're gonna double down on that. We're gonna have more and more content, which in a way demonstrates our marketing effort, which we then repurpose for other content, which doubles down on our content marketing strategy. Okay, Jabri. So Turkey is like a country that during COVID, they kind of went a different direction with banking. And due to them going a different direction with banking, their inflation was like 4 times worse than most countries that are NATO countries. Let's put it that way. Does that make sense? So Turkey experienced like 4 times as much inflation as the rest of countries that would be contemporary with it. Does that make sense? And because of that, they have a significantly low trust in their banking system. So they also have a younger generation. Like their Gen Z is very large. Does that make sense? So their Gen Z, they're experiencing crypto just because they're a digital Gen Z as well, and they're also bankless. So more and more of Gen Z, they're like only using crypto. They're not even entering like the traditional banking system, as it were. Does that make sense? And therefore, something like over half of Turkey holds crypto now. Does that make sense? They had hyperinflation. They don't trust their dollar. And then Gen Z is like not even using actual bank accounts. So yeah, Turkey might be a country that goes fully crypto. Like they might lose their central bank. Yeah, like I have no idea what will happen there. It's be a chaotic system. I could design something for them. Maybe we should design something with PYRESWAP, right? Maybe we should make PYRESWAP the fucking... we should have a PYRESWAP instrument be the nominally rigid currency in circulation in Turkey. That would be fun. Yeah, just a fantasy fiction GameFi DEX being the fucking economic driver of a NATO country. I mean, anything's possible if you believe in yourself. We're talking about 85 million people too. Turkey's not exactly a tiny country. Anyways, I wanted to talk about forwards and futures today. By the way, for those of you who are watching for a incantation demonstration, that is unfortunately not available during this time slot. We try to make this time slot something that fits more people's schedules. Oh, we can look at the NAR report. Yeah, okay. Okay. Well, to be honest, Maddie, what I would do is I would just build the instrument and then I would let somebody else worry about the card. Does that make sense? I will tell you this. supposedly PYRESWAP is getting presented to a group of Istanbul stock market investors this week or next week. There's like 1,200 of them. Yeah. I honestly can't even comment on that now because that's... Anyways. Istanbul is one of the busiest airports. Yeah. I wanted to advertise in Istanbul's airport for that reason. Okay. Let's see. If I go to Google and I go to NAR report, yeah. Okay, there we go. This is literally as of... Nope. This is supposed to be from Market Watch. So if I show you guys here, Market Watch, you can see here that they say there's an existing home sales that drops at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. should be New York time. And this would be for, okay, here's the numbers, I guess. The median forecast, 3.95, and the previous was 3.89. So they're expecting an uptick in home sales. Generally speaking, I think if home sales go up, that's a good sign. They show you existing home sales and new home sales. And anyways, if you actually go to this website, let's look at this. Okay, there you go, 3.95. That is, I guess, just what just dropped 4 minutes ago. Okay, here you go. NAR research, you can see it on fucking Facebook. Okay, existing home sales grew 1.3% in July to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 3.95. So, however, sales slipped 2.5% from 1 year ago. Does that make sense? So it's up 1.3 on the month, down 2.5 from a year ago. That kind of sucks. I will say this. I think the housing market wasn't exactly in the same phase of the wavelength with the rest of the economy, because post-COVID there was like a housing rally, and now there's kind of like a housing crash. So the fact that it's up in a month, I mean, that's fine. Like, you could probably have a 1% waiver here and there anyway. But the fact that it's down from last year doesn't surprise me either. I expect real estate to go more into a buyer's market soon. The problem with this, though, is banks, because banks are heavily invested in real estate, especially the retail ones. If the future value of their properties is kind of like depreciated, banks have the ability to also take like these mortgages and like leverage them for more capital, right? They did this in 2007. And when housing markets depreciate, this does kind of crunch on retail banks' liquidity. Does that make sense? Because the value of all this debt, if the housing prices go down, like they're on a downtrend, the future value of them is also perceived to be going down. Does that make sense? And the perceived future value of these houses going down, that limits their ability to create new liquidity today. Does that make sense to you guys? This is very weird. I know it's weird, so I'm definitely gonna ask if that makes sense. Okay. So additionally, let's see, and we can go back to full screen. What I can talk about today, you guys, is futures and forwards. Okay. And I'm teaching deliberately out of Options, Futures, and Other Derivatives by John C. Hull. This is a commonplace finance textbook. So I'm going to teach this conceptually. Okay. So, who here has ever heard of futures and forwards? Yes? Okay, great. I'm gonna use a different color marker. In fact, I actually bought a whole bunch of new markers that are magnetic. There's actually like a little graph here that's like the differences between futures and forwards. Normally, whatever reason they put forwards on the left here, but for futures, they're exchange traded. Whereas forwards are private contracts. They are standardized. Futures are standardized. Forwards are non-standardized. And I know that I haven't explained what they actually are yet, but I will explain that after this. Futures have like a range of delivery dates, whereas forwards have a specified date. Yeah. Tend to be, yeah, specified dates. And let's see. Futures are settled daily, by the way. And I think forwards are settled all on the last date. Yeah, settled at the end. Settled upon expiry. Can you guys read this? I'm not going to talk about credit risk here, but these are like probably the four major differences that should be understood about futures and forwards. So, both contracts, I can actually eliminate some of this. Both of them, what applies to both of them is both of them are agreements to buy or sell an asset for a certain price at a certain future time. So, do you guys remember the main difference between options and futures? Because an option also involves buying or selling an asset for a certain price at a future time. You guys don't remember? Is that literally? No, I don't think that was the answer to that question. Do you guys remember the main difference between an option and a future? Futures expire as well. Futures expire as well, or they can expire. There are perpetual futures, I guess, but like again, an option represents the right, and a future represents an obligation. So when you buy an option, you have the right to buy this asset for a certain price at a certain time. Does that make sense? But a future is the obligation to buy it at that price. So you have to buy it. The contract with futures is that you have to buy it. Correct. Options cannot be. Options have the ability to not be exercised. Futures have to be exercised. Does that make sense? And because of this, what does this imply about the risk? What does this imply about the risk between options and futures? Like, which one do you guys think would be higher risk, futures or options? Futures are more risky, 100%. Yeah, because the person buying or selling futures has to have skin in the game. Yeah, you're obligated, right? An option is the choice, right? A future is you're already past the choice. You're making the choice in advance. Does that make sense? Okay, fantastic. So the difference here, the difference is that forward contracts are in the over-the-counter market and there's no standard contract. So a forward contract, you can actually literally at like certain brokers, like OTC brokers, you can actually like request the terms of this. There's like a handful of terms, like, and they can actually rapidly build you a forward contract if they're willing to find somebody else to take the other side of the deal. If they can find that in the next like 24 hours, eventually. A forward contract is not something that I guess you would ever see really in DeFi. I mean, we could maybe in theory make them, but like I don't really have any plans to. Futures are stuff that people do want to see in DeFi. And in fact, do you guys understand what standardized versus non-standardized means? When you have them standardized, it's what makes these instruments fungible. Does that make sense? So like one future that's uniform with the same contract, they can be swapped for each other. Does that make sense? Like all the futures are going to be the same exact terms, and they're just going to make a stack of these papers that people can buy and sell among each other. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Okay, so a single delivery date is usually here. Yeah, a specified date for the forward, and a futures contract is standardized on an exchange, a range of delivery dates, and it's settled daily, and it's usually closed out prior to maturity. Okay, so futures are normally like closed out prior to their expiration date, whereas forwards, they're required to be on the expiration date. I'm just telling you guys what forwards are. It's for your understanding. It's possible that on PYRESWAP we will have futures in the future. There is, I want to say it's actually easier to implement futures in DeFi than it is for options, like true options. And I want to say that actually has been implemented on certain dApps and or centralized exchanges. But generally speaking, the problem here again is that when we talk about them being settled daily, do you guys understand what that means? Okay, Electronic has a link for an actual futures thing. Good. If you guys want to check that out, you can. I might have already looked at that project. I have no idea. But when they're settled daily, what this means is that when you take, let's say, like on a platform like Robinhood, if you get into the position of a futures, you have you get settled daily, meaning your margin account will go up or down based on the value of the value change of the future you got into. Does that make sense to you guys? So an example here. I'm now going to erase this, guys. Right? Everybody good? I mean, we're recorded, so if you want to look at this again, you can. So we can actually do a scenario of like how a Bitcoin future would look, if that makes sense. So let's say you have a standardized future contract that you will buy, bearer will buy 10 Bitcoin at, let's see, what's the price today, 60? I should honestly check these. 60, okay, 60K. So we'll say bearer will buy 10 Bitcoin at 60 grand. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? And what you're selling is in fact not the option, not the ability to exercise it, but you are in fact like buying the obligation. Like when you buy into this contract, it now has, by the way, because it's a little bit, it's less. Options will have like a higher. Options will tend to have like a higher buy price because like it's a little bit less risk. Does that make sense? Whereas futures could have like a little bit of a lower entry, generally speaking, for like the same transaction. So if you're looking at an option compared to future, where a bearer has the right to buy 10 Bitcoin at 60 grand in the future, this is going to cost generally a little bit more than a future. Does that make sense? Because like a bearer has to buy this in the future. So now, let's say like an option, we did the numbers at like at 5%. We could say a future's at like 1%. So if this is 600 grand and if this was 600 grand, right, then you could say that 1% of that would be $6,000, right? So like literally the position entry $6,000. If this was an option, you would probably be paying more for it. But the fact of the matter is that you need, I think, generally, you need to have a higher margin account to actually trade futures. Does that make sense? Like your margin account is going to be fluctuating higher and lower. Does that make sense to you guys? So you're going to have a margin account, and let's say that it's, I don't know, 100 grand. I'm not even trying to guess that. But if you have an entry price of 6,000 for the obligation to buy at 10,000, and then effectively what happens is tomorrow, Bitcoin is at 65,000. What that means is what's the value, like what's the potential profit of you going from 60K to 65K? What's the potential profit of this future? There's 10 Bitcoin that you can potentially sell for 65K, but you chose to buy it at this price. $50K, yeah. So effectively speaking, this future that you just bought for $6 grand, this price change of like 8%, right? Okay? You know what? Let's make it a little bit higher, Maddie. Let's say it's 66K. That's 10%. It's easier for me to do it. 66K, right? So now there's 60 grand in profit, right? There's now 60 grand in profit. So this entry right here, this $6,000 is now worth the difference. Does that make sense? So this 6K is going to go to probably like what, 54K, something like that. I don't actually know this math right here, but it'll probably be like above 54K. Does that make sense? Making sense to you guys? So literally, Bitcoin going up 10% did what to your money here? Like that's virtually what, an 800% gain? What is 54K divided by 6? Here, I got the calculator pin. This is amazing. We got technology on our side today. 84. 54 divided by 6 equals 9. Yeah. 900% gain off a 10% price change. Make sense? Does that make sense to you guys? Leverage indeed. Now that's very bullish when you see the future is working for your favor. Does that make sense? Wouldn't you guys agree that's bullish to see that a future can work in your favor? But what would happen if Bitcoin went to 54K? Right? And now you're obligated to buy Bitcoin $60,000 at this future date. Well, first of all, what's going to happen is your margin account is going to get fucking hemorrhaged. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah. You might get liquidated. Yeah, you might get liquidated. It's I honestly couldn't tell you because the math around margin accounts is not something that I've really dove into yet. It's just going to be another ratio for sure. But I like that we corrected that typo on stream. Yeah, literally that. Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with the hotkeys as well. I'm a fan of the pink Wojak meme myself. So this $6,000 entry is now worth, this is now a losing position of, I guess the same amount, 60 grand. So literally, this thing has been crushed. Like this is gonna now be like, I don't know, $60, and your margin account is going to have negative 50 grand in it. Does that make sense? Like your margin account is going to be down negative 50 grand. Does that make sense? Because they have to make up the difference. And your margin account gets settled daily. Does that make sense? So like they just take that money out like every day. Does that make sense? So I hope that first of all you had 50 grand in there. Like I think we said we had 100 grand in there. Like I don't know what number we said before. I don't really know margin. I've heard there's certain percentages for margin accounts, but I think it's different here and there. And I want to be clear again. These derivatives. Okay, does everybody now understand what a future is? More or less. Do we think we have general understanding here? Okay, so again, if you guys heard me talk about this before, we have the same problem with, first of all, exercise. Yeah, ledger economy problems. Ledger ecosystem problems. With derivatives. Honestly, this right here should be fucking... Me creating a list of these, this should definitely be a core tenet of Fiveanism. But anyways, ledger ecosystem problems with derivatives. Again, mempool problems. Concerning exercise. Do you guys understand what I mean when I say mempool problems concerning exercise? True exercise. Yes, sandwich bots and things like that. Yes. Make sense to everybody? Sandwich bots and things like that. Minor extractable value. Okay. What else do you guys think? Yeah. Custodial arrangements of margin accounts. Okay, do you guys remember this problem? And what we're talking about here? There's two things here. There's two applications here. One, you have a crazy amount of approvals on somebody's wallet. Does that make sense? So like, imagine if you were in a future position and this futures DEX would literally just have the approval to literally take money right out of your wallet to settle the future daily. Does that make sense? Or maybe per epoch. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, first of all, imagine the fact that they could, in theory, in a margin account, prevent you. Yeah. Oh, no, Maddie. Every time Bitcoin changes price from 60 to 66K or 60 to 54K, they change the balance in your margin account, which is your money. So, what the future is worth that day, they literally either add money to it or they take money away from it. They, in fact, do that. Oh, awesome. Yeah. Hilarious. Yeah, they literally settle it every day. In reverse, you could cancel custodial allowances. Yeah. 0K, exactly. Yeah, it's what if you revoke approval? That's a fucking problem, right? Do you guys get what I'm saying? So that's a problem. But then 0K, the other problem is okay, well, if that's the case that we need to run a margin account, then the people that want to trade futures here, they need to literally send 90 grand to a DEX to literally hold in a fucking, locker for them. Does that make sense? Like a little locker contract. So now, based on the amount of futures trading happening, this DEX just has I don't want to describe a number, but you understand that for just being in this one $6,000 position, it was they needed to have 100 grand to kind of make it seem like they could take a 10% swing. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah, Jabri, you ain't wrong. Yeah, futures is degen as shit. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, a guy named Forker is a futures trader. Yeah. But what I'm getting at here is that you're either going to have these ridiculous approvals in people's wallets, or you're going to require that people fill margin accounts. Does that make sense? Which then effectively, the DEX now controls the margin account, and then basically they get their money out of the margin account. Like, I guess you would make it like staking. Does that make sense? But the problem there is that now you're just keeping a whole bunch of capital. Does that make sense to you guys? You're keeping a whole bunch of capital just kind of like chilling in a margin account. So personally, the way I would design this is that you would actually use LP, possibly LP like, let me say like, I'm actually not going to tell you guys. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what LP. Yeah, but like I would use LP in these accounts because LP accounts collect yield for the time they're staked. Does that make sense? And naturally, you would want to use LP that perhaps has some sort of resistance to to sharp changes. Well, Maddie, that's true. That's true. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, I think generally speaking, Maddie, let's put it this way. It would make more sense for us to create futures for things like 2 ohm, 3 ohm, Z ohm, and Pyre Phantom than it would for things like Bitcoin. Does that make sense? Because once we get these tokens up into the vibratile range, they're not going to be as volatile. Does that make sense? So in theory, through these tokens, even though they're vibratile, right, they're now a little bit, their price charts are a little bit more flat, right? They're a little bit calmer, as it were. You can in fact still create derivatives from them in order to kind of allow people to get leverage trading on their price performance. Believe it or not, this is kind of what Taro does already, you know, but like you stake LP and then you borrow it single asset. Do you guys know what I mean? Like if you stake liquidity, you can borrow the single asset. So it's like you can leverage trade through there. Do you guys get it? Javery, that's a good question. To be honest, like leverage trading is kind of what you already have. You know what I mean? Like you take the LP and you create that. That's why platforms like Aave and Taro and Imprimax do kind of well. Because like, hey, I can do a leverage trade if I have the LP staked. Generally, Jeffrey, what I think the problem there is that there's a lot of liquidity pairs that don't really kind of like converge back to each other's prices. Does that make sense? This is actually something that we're trying to create in the grand scheme of things here with PYRESWAP, because we will have these tokens that effectively orbit each other's prices, if that makes sense. So I agree that, like, you know, having the Taro pairs would be a much easier way to provide this value than a future. I would say that there might be certain things that are benefits based on the fact that we have an epoch system. Does that make sense? So you can use an epoch system for things like expiry and settlement, things like that. And it would just be a different configuration. And and I would say that leverage trading and options, they're still not going to be the exact same curve. Does that make sense? Yeah, like, so an option in a future, if you say that an option is like going to do 4x what the thing's going to do, and what a future will do will be like 8x or 9x, that's still different than a leverage position in that token itself. Does that make sense? Like, it's still, I know that on this whiteboard, it sounds like we're just eyeballing the math and it's all linear numbers and it's all, you know, clean numbers. But on an actual price chart, there's going to be a little bit of differences between convexity and stuff. And Javery, I want you to know, one of the reasons that derivatives exist is actually for hedging. Did you know that? Like, not for degen use cases, but for actually to offset potential losses. So one of the cool things about options is that they provide the right, but not the, they create the right to sell or buy, but not the obligation. So you can use options to hedge like traditional positions. Does that make sense? So that's one of the reasons. That's one of the use cases for options for delta neutral hedging, which I'm not going to explain what that is. But yeah, no, I agree. Javery, I want you to understand when I talk about like the problems with DeFi with implementing these, I'm also trying to explain why we built instruments in PYRESWAP that didn't have these problems. Does that make sense? I don't know if you've been exposed to meterage, but meterage is a convertibility option. So believe it or not, when the price of Pyre Phantom is above the prices of 2Ohm and 3Ohm and Zohm, it makes the prices of 2Ohm, 3Ohm, and Zohm behave like an option. They go up significantly. Does that make sense? Like because either the immediate gain from converting it or the speculation on somebody else gaining from converting it. Well, yeah, Javery, I'm aware. Yeah, meterage hasn't seen use for a few weeks at least. Not since June, I think, June or July. But yeah, no, I'm completely aware. But when we were doing this pre-Genesis, meterage was happening several times a week. Yeah, several times a week. Different chains were doing it. Yeah, it was there. It was visible. We were testing it all the time. Yeah, and it's a convertibility option because like what we're doing in the grand scheme of things, is we're consolidating debt. So we're taking the bad debt of 2Ohm, 3Ohm, and Zohm, and we're consolidating it into Pyre Phantom, which is a consolidated debt instrument. Pyre Phantom as an instrument also has its own option, which is the option to claim yield. Does that make sense to you guys? When you stake into the Incantation Witch Vault, it is a very, very exotic option about receiving yield on this instrument. Does that make sense to you guys? The fact of the matter is how does Pyre Phantom not die even under the craziest smaller swap fees? So this will become more apparent on more price charts, if that makes sense. I hope it makes sense to you guys. Yeah, like there's always a use case for it, even at the worst price in the world. At the best price in the world, arguably, it's the same use case. The EPR you guys get, that EPR is almost like a stable coin. Does that make sense? Maddie, we have no idea. Yeah, Maddie, we're marketing now like in a way we've never done before. So like, oh, you mean like, oh, we're going to do that? Maddie, I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, I have to hit the first target, which is the user base. Javery, yes. That's all I have to say to that. There's several incentives to LP after Genesis. Yeah. So like Maddie, you talking about having the second factory? That is not contingent on the end of Genesis. That is contingent on us hitting the phase. That is on us finishing phase 1. So Genesis can last through phase 1 or in the middle of phase 1, or we can be in phase 3. I don't fucking know. But yeah, like that's not contingent on Genesis end. That's contingent on like us finishing phase 1. Which again, in order to make this work, we just have to build Witch Vault familiarity among a few hundred people. We already have a few dozen people. Does that make sense? So like the work in front of us is not that crazy. It just requires us increasing awareness. Does that make sense? We're already making leaps and bounds with simple things like this with the PYRESWAP show, as well as ramping up our Twitter and our Reddit and our Facebook and our Instagram and our TikTok, etc., etc. You guys get it? Phenomenal. Let's see. This is a round, yeah. This is exactly what we need, yeah. Anyways, yeah, we have stickers getting distributed across 10 cities in Turkey. It blows my mind. So we're going to have so much content. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. I'm probably going to have to learn how to speak Turkish. Or we'll have another version of the PYRESWAP show with a Turkish host. Yeah. Yeah, I'll start today. I'm joking, but I don't know. In the future, considering how let's put it this way. Turkey right now, I want to say the USA. Okay. In the USA, I want to say we have like 20,000 monthly unique page views, and then Turkey, has about 10,000 unique page views. For those of you who don't understand, Turkey has a quarter of the population of the USA. Does that make sense? Turkey is about 80 million, and maybe USA is actually 5 times as much. Maybe USA is at 400 million now. I have no idea. But the point being is that this actually implies that we are twice as popular in Turkey as we are in the USA. Does that make sense, everybody? Granted, we're also very popular. Yeah, exactly. Well, Maddie, exactly. Because, again, we're already twice as popular there based on the population. Does that make sense to you guys? This is also why I keep talking about a billboard in Istanbul. All right, anyways. That, I think, is everything we have for the PYRESWAP show today. I hope this was educational and or useful, or at least entertaining. Forehead kisses for all of you. Shot putting them your way. More on that later. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, I don't see any sort of indication that we have questions. So thank you for coming to the PYRESWAP show. As a reminder, tomorrow is a much different schedule. We might be getting into the habit of creating new content as well that you guys will see. Yes, Maddie, yeah. That'll probably be on Sunday. Yeah. Again, that will be, it'll probably be this Sunday and then the next Sunday too. So the next 2 following Sundays, we will taper emissions. And I know, by the way, I know that everybody who wants the chart to reverse trend like today, that's like a trial of patience. But I have an obligation. Okay, the chart being red right now is great for recruiting because it filters out the weak people. Am I being clear? It filters out the weak. I don't want to sound like a Darwinistic psychopath, but that's really the difference maker here. You know what I mean? Everyone's your friend when the chart's green. I want to know who the fuck my friend is when the chart's red. Does that make sense? Yeah. I want to know who's my friend when the chart's red. I don't have green candle friends. I've had dozens of them, dozens upon dozens. Green candle friends, yes. No, I want red candle friends. Okay. So secondly, that's one of the reasons. Yeah. Right. Oh yeah, thousands of them. Everyone's your friend on green candle day. Let's find out who your friend is on red candle day. Right. Secondly, because we're in this inflationary downtrend, we need to make the chart look to all the thousands of TA traders that are looking for a reversal. We need to taper it in such a way that it first goes like this. Does that make sense? First it goes like this, then it goes like this, then it goes like this, then it goes like this. Does that make sense? We want this shape. Do you guys get it? Yes. That which appears to be a healthy bottom. This right here is the 1% daily emission rate. The 1% daily emission rate, to be clear, if everybody was compounding into Genesis, only about half of that would be getting sold. Does that make sense? You guys get it? Because the majority of the emissions, does that make sense, is going to the pairs that have Pyre Phantom, Pyre AVAX, Pyre BNB in liquidity. Does that make sense? So at a 1% daily, if everybody was compounding, maybe 0.6 of that is getting sold. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? Maybe people have paper hands. But again, I'm okay with losing them as well. The fact of the matter is that when we get to the point that it's flat, we're also going to have days that randomly uptick volume. Does that make sense? And when those days that randomly uptick volume happens, the incantation itself does what? What do we always have happening behind the chart? Indeed, Javery, indeed. What do we always have happening behind the chart? Pop quiz. Fundamental analysis. Not only that, Maddie, it's not the buying and the burn, but what I'm talking about is the velvet rope pattern. Does that make sense? So if we taper emissions down, we will again reveal the velvet rope pattern. Does that make sense? And the velvet rope pattern is going to put these random spikes. Yes, exactly. The velvet rope pattern is going to put these random spikes on the chart. Correct. Does that make sense to you guys? So we're going to go to a flat pattern, and then it's going to start spiking. And this will begin looking a little bit more bullish. Does that make sense? So therefore, this right here is where I think we'll be able to begin really compounding awareness and adoption and exposure and the trend reversal, if that makes sense to you guys. Because once you hit the enough people feel that enough people feel there's enough people, yeah, then you'll have enough. Then you'll have all the trend you need. But again, it isn't a miracle. It just requires arguably a few dozen more people to understand this project. Yeah, just a few dozen more. Yeah, I do mean like 10 dozen, maybe 20 dozen. But yeah, a few dozen. It gets easier the more the more. Yeah, like the increase of people, it gets easier. Social proof, again, it's huge. So we're just jacking up our awareness mechanisms. Everything from Twitter to distributing 2,000 stickers across Turkey. And yeah, more on that later. Thank you guys so much for coming to the PYRESWAP show. Have a great rest of your day.